Hello, my dearest friends. This is Daniel Karapkin. I'm not in Canada right now. I'm actually in California visiting with family. And so allow me to share with you from a distance some thoughts on Parshas Pinchas. So here we are. We're standing at the border of the promised land of Eretz Yisrael, and we're presented with the news that we're soon going to be the new owners of this glorious land. Imagine the excitement and joyful anticipation upon hearing this news. But not everyone was ecstatic. Invariably, there must have been people who thought that they would be excluded from this gift. And shortly after the laws of how Eretz Yisrael would be apportioned, were after those laws are given, the 5 daughters of Tzlofchad approached the Jewish leaders. The Torah makes a point of telling us that they didn't petition Moshe himself alone. They rather stood in front of Moshe, Elazar, the tribal heads, and the rest of the congregation at the entrance to the tent meeting. In presenting their case as to why they felt that they should receive a portion of land, even though they were women and not men, they stated as follows: Avinu meit bamidbar, our father died in the desert. V'hu lo haya b'toch ha'edah hano'adim al Hashem ba'adat Korach. He was not part of the insurrection against God that bandied together with Korach. Ki v'chet'o meit uvanim lo hayu lo. He died because of his own sin, and he had no sons. Tzlofchad's daughters believed that they were entitled to their father's portion in Eretz Yisrael, since he had been among those who had left Egypt, the people to whom the land was promised. But why did they feel a need to discuss the circumstances behind their father's death? Why did they have to observe that he wasn't part of Korach's insurrection, but rather that he died because of his own sin? Why couldn't they just have simply said, Moshe, our father died in the desert, he had no sons, so we would like to receive our father's portion? Some commentaries suggest that those who participated with Korach were stripped of their portion in Eretz Yisrael. The daughters therefore wanted to emphasize that our father had nothing to do with this insurrection and therefore did not deserve to have his portion taken away. The Or HaChaim commentary offers that Tzlofchad's daughters were worried, especially after they heard that the Levium, the Levites, would not be receiving any portion in Eretz Yisrael. Now they knew that Moshe was a Levite, and therefore, because of his family status, they were worried maybe he will have an unfavorable disposition towards anyone asking for special preferential treatment in getting a portion of the land of Eretz Yisrael. And they especially were worried that perhaps Moshe harbors some malice towards our father because maybe he thinks that our father died as a result of rebelling against God or God's emissary, Moshe. And that's why they tried to ingratiate themselves to Moshe. They reassured him that our father was never part of any insurrection. When he died for something that was of a personal nature that had nothing to do with Jewish communal life. Now, Ibn Ezra quotes his dear friend, the great Spanish rabbi Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, on this pasuk, and he explains that what the daughters of Tzlofchad were essentially saying when they said that our father died for his own sin, they weren't stating that he did something wrong. They were merely stating that Tzlofchad lacked sufficient merit to have this blessing of having sons during his lifetime. They weren't referring to any specific sin per se, but when you live in a patriarchal society where real estate is transferred through the patriarchy and not through the women, they just were trying to communicate that our father lacked the merit to see sons in his life. He only had daughters. When we think about the current social morass that we find ourselves in, I think we can gain added insight into this story. We live in an age of cancel culture, where historical figures are being erased because it's been discovered that they did something which, according to the moral standards of today's society, makes them irredeemable and unworthy of being remembered in any way other than in the negative. A person may have been a founding father of his country, but if he owns slaves, which is an abjectly immoral act, he must be canceled. Of course, the error in this kind of thinking is that when you subject prior generations to the moral standards of today, everyone falls short. Just a few short decades ago, it was acceptable to consign women to limited roles and to exclude them from certain professions. Does that mean we should cancel anyone who was part of that society? Should we cancel all of America and Canada because of its past? If we do, then we have no history and no basis for our way of life and our moral standards. And without a history, you also have no future. Furthermore, canceling the past is short-sighted. Consider how many things we have done as a culture that our grandchildren will consider as having been barbaric and immoral. So, for example, many of us eat animals, and just imagine what our grandchildren will consign us to, pointing that accusatory finger at us. We cancel the past at our peril, since this will signal to our future progeny that they too have license to cancel us. You know, the Jewish people recognize that our ancestors weren't perfect, and they may have even done things that we wouldn't dream of doing today, such as owning slaves, owning another human being. But we still hold prior generations up as exemplars of virtue for their devotional commitments, and we use their shortcomings as lessons for us to try to become better people. Tzlofchad's daughters understood that certain rebels who violated the authority of Hashem and Moshe were beyond the pale. Indeed, such people deserve to be canceled from the future of Eretz Yisrael. But they also realized that people in positions of power can sometimes be overly vengeful and punitive. They also knew that their father's sin did not rise to the level of being canceled. He may not have been a perfect man and probably harbored some remnants of Egyptian values that remained long after he physically left the country of Egypt. But he didn't deserve to have everything stripped from him just because of his imperfections. And that's when they approached Moshe. And they approached him with great caution. And that in the event that Moshe, you are a proponent of cancel culture, we want to have other people present to create a more balanced judgment. They also emphasized that their father, despite his imperfections, did nothing to rise to the level of total cancellation. Now, while they were very cautious in approaching Moshe, it's interesting to note that instead of coming down hard on these women, Moshe, in his great righteousness and humility, did just the opposite. The Torah says, "Vayakrev Moshe et mishpatan lifnei Hashem." He brought their judgment close to God. Instead of distancing their petition from Hashem, Moshe did just the opposite. He brought their judgment close to God. That is, he presented their argument in the best possible light in order to garner a positive response. And it wasn't just their petition that Moshe was bringing to God. If you look in a Sefer Torah where it says the word mishpatan, he brought their judgment to God. The letter nun in that word mishpatan is very large, much larger than all of the other letters in the Sefer Torah. One of the ways of explaining it is that he wasn't just bringing their shaila to God. He was bringing them as human beings to God. Mishpatan means not their question, but they themselves Moshe was bringing up to Hashem. Mishpatan, the judgment of them as human beings, as females who deserve to be treated with dignity and as future leaders of the Jewish people. That's what Moshe brought up to God. He wanted to validate not only their argument, but who they were as people. There is so much to learn from Moshe's behavior, especially today when people are canceling each other on social media. We dispose of people as easily as we dispose of paper cups. If we hear an opinion that is unsavory to us, we not only disagree with that point of view, we delegitimize the source of that opinion as a person or group of people who are completely without worth. Just because a person may be wrong in our view on a certain matter, whether it be politics, social issues, or anything else, just because they've sinned in our judgment, does not mean that they should be denied a portion of holy space in our hearts and in our lives. Instead of canceling that person, let's first engage and see if we can find common ground. When we can't, then let's at least recognize the value of the individual despite their sin, despite their dissenting view. We've just started the period of Bein HaMitzarim, when we're meant to combat the senseless hatred against our fellow man. If we don't fight against today's cancel culture, there will be a new slogan on the horizon, and that slogan will be "No Lives Matter." And that's not a tagline we can afford to adopt. Let us rather instill each human being with the infinite value they deserve, and in so doing take one more step towards the redemption May we see it b'mheira b'yameinu, amen. And let me just leave a final word to the friends that I have at the Bayit in Toronto. I just want to let you know that over the next few weeks, we're going to be starting an emergency campaign for the shul. Every single member of the shul is going to be contacted. And I think it would just be so amazing if every single member participates according to his or her ability. Please answer the phone, answer your email, and give generously to our shul. We cannot do it without you. I'm wishing you a wonderful Shabbos wherever you are, and I really look forward to seeing you when I return. A good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom.